Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at 42 Ronin. That's the guy you can see on screen right now. And as always, I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first half of the video, and in the second half of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment and everything else. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. What this character is going to be about, plain and simple, is basically a gladiator character, meaning that we are going to use one-handed weaponry. And in addition to that, I wanted to make it a VATS build, just in order to get some extra damage from legendary effects, legendary perks. But we're not going to focus on crits too much. I'm going to explore the idea of crits and melee a little bit and why I decided against it. I have done so in past videos, but just going over the whole issue, so to speak, again. And yeah, overall, it's a very visually driven character, as you can probably tell. Now this time around I really wanted to make this kind of samurai look, and I had a poll where, since you guys have had some suggestions for characters, including gladiator weapons, I didn't really want to decide on which one to do. We were talking about one suggestion about using a rolling pin and doing a chef kind of character, and one where we were talking about using a hatchet, and yeah. Those were obviously pretty similar in terms of perk loadouts and everything, so I decided to just make a few different versions and let you guys decide. And with pretty big difference, the samurai actually won, which was kind of surprising. I thought that for the meme value maybe some of you guys would go for something like the chef or so, but overall, yeah, it turned out that we were going to do this character here, and my approaches to using a rolling pin or a hatchet would have been pretty similar to this one here. But yeah, let's talk about this character in specific. I always liked the fact that the shish kebab kind of resembles a sword, or is a sword, to be honest, because that's something that's pretty lacking in terms of melee weapons, in my opinion. Like, I would love to have more swords, more traditional swords. Now, obviously, nowadays we do have a samurai sword skin, which is pretty cool. I made a really cool character that I really like to play with in the past. But yeah, this is a little bit more of a samurai that you would expect to see within the Wasteland, and it turned out pretty cool. Also, I could include the makeshift Ronin helmet, which I had on my character for a while now. I think you can unlock the plan for it by completing the Earl Williams fight, the Colossal Problem event. Don't quote me on that though. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from, but I'm not 100% sure. But I really like it. It's pretty cool, and it goes really well together with the Brotherhood armor that we do wear with the Union skin, in my opinion. The color palette works out pretty well. But yeah, another end. One thing you can already tell is that we have pretty good damage output, which is just mostly a detriment to the shish kebab. We don't have any legendary effects increasing our damage straight up, so this is just a modified shish kebab basically, with vampire swing speed and less VATS cost. So I mean, we do have a boost to our DPS due to the faster swing speed, but in terms of raw damage, there's not a lot going on that improves it, other than, yeah, the standard perks and everything, but we're going over that later. Now, the big part of the video that I teased a little bit is that we are using VATS, and that's basically to make use of the hack and slash perk. And the hack and slash perk, it addressed a problem, in my opinion, that the game has, which is that VATS melee just didn't feel right. It's a gripe I had in the game since day one, basically. I really wanted to make a melee character use VATS, but there's just not a whole lot of reason to it. If anything, it's basically more of a downside than any benefit. See, the problem with VATS and melee in this game is using VATS with melee weapons compared to using VATS with ranged weapons has one huge issue already, which is that you can target specific limbs, which is a decision I always found a little weird, to be honest, because I see no real reason for it. And yeah, losing out on headshots is obviously a big problem. Now you could argue that with melee weapons, it's in general not a big thing to go for headshots, but if you're not using that, you can actually do it relatively well, aiming for the head. That is, it doesn't work 100% of the time, but you can do it pretty effectively, and I always try to do so when I'm playing with a melee character. Now with that, it can also happen that your hits do connect with the head, as far as I know, but it's just not really something that happens all of the time, and you have no control over it. So overall, it's basically not really an option, and there is the first big point where you're missing out on a lot of damage compared to ranged VATS characters. And the second big thing is that due to the way crits work in this game, with melee they just don't pack the same kind of punch as with ranged weapons, mainly due to the fact that your critical damage is connected to your base weapon damage. And this is a topic where, in my opinion, melee was shafted quite a bit when the change from was made from the multiplicative damage model to the additive model. Now, obviously, this also affected ranged weapons, but the big factor here is that strength, which, as you probably know, affects your melee damage, also had a big influence on your overall damage, which nowadays it also has, but this is also a additive bonus nowadays. So the base weapon of your base damage of your melee weapon not only means that it is the damage of the weapon without any modifications and any perks, but also as if you were to use the weapon with only one strength. And this is where the problem lies, in my opinion, because that makes it so that the base damage of melee weapons is absolutely garbage in most situations. Just as a little example, for example, I was trying to make this is a while back. I was trying to make a stealth melee build with a Deathclaw Gauntlet, so not melee but unarmed, but you get the point. And I was using an instigating weapon, and it was terrible. And looking into it, I found out that, don't quote me on that just because it's been a while, but the base damage of the weapon is something like 20 points of damage or something, without any modifications or strength buff or anything. Alright. As always, the Assaultron here is a little bit of a problem just because we can't VATS it and it has a high DPS, so we kind of have to see how we're addressing him. I really hope we can just heal through all of this, but yeah, looks like we are done with him, and now we can focus back on the Mr. Gutsies, which are also pretty terrifying enemies in this game, but nothing compared to the Assaultron unless you have a right character for it. Back to the topic. Yeah, the terrible base damage of the weapon makes it so that crits add relatively little to your overall damage output, even if you manage to pump out the crit every second hit. And they do so despite you needing to invest quite a lot of perk points into it. So, into using crits effectively. So overall, if you're going for a VATS melee character, the only real reason to do so, in my opinion, is the fact that you can get access to using the hack and slash perk, which causes all of these explosions. Now, the hack and slash perk in and of itself is also something I have my gripes with, for the simple reason that I like the addition of it, but it's so, I would say, unique to a point that it does feel wrong on a lot of builds. Now, on this occasion, it's actually kind of okay because we're using a flaming weapon, and therefore all these explosions not really make sense, but feel rather fitting. But it's a big damage boost to your character that oftentimes feels out of place. I hope you're understanding what I mean. And especially because it could have been avoided relatively easily. I just didn't get the decision to make it a perk that lets enemies explode. Because this feels a little weird. Like, you could have done pretty much the exact same thing by just adding an animation to the weapon that makes it do a big swing rather than an explosion. And you could have had the same effect. It could have worked out pretty well and wouldn't feel out of place on pretty much any melee character. Obviously, this is a little gripe. The perk overall is still very effective. I still like it. But yeah, anyways, that's pretty much the whole story here. Overall, you can see that the damage output we're doing is pretty good, which was surprising to me. I did want to go... I was pretty early on deciding to go with the shish kebab for this build, but I was having not the fondest memories of the shish kebab in the past. It always felt a little underpowered. But on this occasion, I was, yeah, as I said, I was actually pretty surprised that I was doing so well. I really enjoyed it. And I'm not feeling like I miss out on damage in any situation. I can pretty comfortably take on every single enemy within the game. Now, don't get me wrong, you most likely won't going to solo the Scorch Beast Queen with this build, but it has its place. And for day-to-day use, it's really good, actually. I really enjoy it. And yeah, due to the fact that we have vampires, we're also relatively tanky. Not enough to out-heal damage from sources like minigun wielding super mutants once they lock on you or something like that, but you're not overly relying on stim packs. That's what I'm trying to say here. And yeah, aesthetic works out pretty well, overall damage is good. I really enjoy this build. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, biggest thing still the aesthetics, but yeah, what can I say? Now, okay, we do have a legendary here. Swing speed is great, the VATS cost is okay. This is another big problem when it comes to melee and VATS, in my opinion, in this game. Specializing into VATS, there's not a whole lot you can do. As I said, you could really invest heavily into using crits, but that's not really something that will have the biggest returns. And other than that, there's not a whole lot you can do with your loadout. Compared to ranged weapons, pretty much every single ranged weapon has a bunch of modifications you can do in order to reduce the amount of AP that a that a VATS attack costs. Talking about aligned barrels, stocks, reflex sights, the right magazines. So ultimately, just by modding the weapon, you can have better overall AP reduction in VATS than from the legendary perk, legendary effect. Which is something that you just can't do with melee weapons. They have a fixed amount of action points that they do use when used in VATS, and you can't really change that other than with the legendary effect, which we do have on this occasion. Now, it does make the weapon usable in VATS, it's not terrible, but still, it would be nice to have more options when it comes to this part. Another big thing is you do miss out on power attacks when you're using VATS, to a degree. Now, there's definitely a way to use power attacks and it's not overly convoluted, but the only way to do power attacks in VATS with melee weapons is by sprinting into an enemy and attacking him, but that only works for the first attack after you sprint. At that point, you're not sprinting anymore, and so oftentimes your first attack does a lot of damage because, as I said, it is a power attack, and it has its place, but it really isn't an option anymore the moment you go against something tougher, like a Behemoth or Scorched Beast or whatever you can't really hit in one hit, kill in one hit. So yeah, that's another big point you're missing out on when using melee in VATS compared to using melee as is. Now, by the way, I'm not really sure why overall the mutants seem to be relatively low level at this video. Most of the times they should be higher level, but I mean, we do have our level 100s and so on, but I've seen a few level 50s that shouldn't be really here. But anyways, here we do have a level 100 super mutant, and we will see how it goes. Just assumed he was there and therefore was attacking nothing. And here you can see, if all stars align, we can one-shot a level 100 super mutant, which is actually pretty great. This is always a nice achievement. It ultimately doesn't change the world in most situations, because I'm a big fan of the idea that, yeah, one-shotting an enemy is not really necessary in most cases. I mean, if you one or two-shot him, it won't make a whole lot of a difference, but it's nice to see it every now and then. It feels satisfying. And talking about satisfying feel, that's generally something I'm happy to say I accomplished with this build, which was a big surprise. I really thought this build would ultimately feel a little bit more cumbersome than it actually is. And yeah, as I said, nice surprise, really liked it, and overall, this is one of those situations where you can really see my problem with the hack and slash perk. it's good enough so you really feel like you're missing out not using it. But on the other side, it's really distracting. Like, you're not seeing a whole lot of fights. Most of the times there's explosions going on, and it's really distracting. It just feels wrong, doesn't it? But yeah. I hear a treasure hunter. Let's just him up. I mean, not that the treasure hunter will be too much of a problem for us, but... where is it? I guess I don't see a big reason to hunt it down, but yeah, fuck it. This was basically it when it comes to our gameplay part of the video. Here we have another legendary super mutant, and as you can see here, damage is a little inconsistent. Now we do have, I think this was more than a minute, so we probably don't have any benefit from adrenaline at this point, but still, this guy gives me a little bit more trouble than it should, so yeah. This was the gameplay part of the video. We're now going to take a look at the perks and everything. I just see that there are 2 more super mutants here, so let's take them out real quick. By the way, I always had the suspicion that crits can increase the amount of times hack and slash procs, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. It just felt like it for me, I guess. I hope those ticks aren't aggroed now, so that we can talk about our perks a little bit, but yeah, there's another super mutant. I always hate when I'm doing this part of the video, because for some reason I always tend to overlook a lot of the enemies. Now if we run out of VATs, by the way, this is, sorry, out of action points, by the way, this is something I made sure. We do have good AP refresh, so every now and then you will run out of VATs in this playstyle, but you will refresh it in no time at all. So that's just something I did try to accomplish by using the right equipment and some perks. But yeah, talking about it, let's take a look at it. Starting off with our mutations. Now, when it comes to melee builds, typically I find mutations a little more useful than with most ranged builds, but overall they're always useful. So what we do have on this occasion is Grounded, which has a little detriment to our energy gun damage and gives us energy resistance in return, making us a little bit more tanky, which on this situation doesn't affect us at all. The shish kebab is not classified as an energy weapon, despite it. I mean, I wasn't too sure. It could have been, you know, but it's actually not an energy weapon, and therefore doesn't get a debuff from it. Even if it would, minus 12% is not the world. Could hurt, but yeah, not the world. Then we do have Herd Mentality, just to give us access to stats. To extra special points, plus 2 special points when grouped. This can go up to 3 special points when we are in a group with someone who is mutated. It's not the case in this situation, because I just made a exploration team for myself, where I'm alone, so I just get the 2 extra to all of my special points, which is pretty useful, especially on a melee character, considering that it's a direct buff to our damage by buffing strength a little bit, even though it's not the world. And in addition to that, yeah, we can also benefit a lot from a little bit of extra agility for more action points to use, and a little bit of extra endurance for just yet a little bit more tankiness. Then we do have Marsupial, which is an all-rounder. Just jumping higher is nice. I mean, extra carry weight is cool. Definitely not a problem on this character. Just because, yeah, we have high strength, so we have naturally high carry weight to begin with. But the jump height is definitely the thing that's sold me on using it, as always. Then we do have Scaly Skin. Now, I just made a point that action points can be useful to us just because we are using them to use our weapon in VATs. But minus 12 action points is really not a big cost, considering the fact that we do get yet a little bit more tankiness from Scaly Skin by buffing our damage and energy resistance. Now, one thing you will see is we are above the points of diminishing returns, so you could ultimately live without Scaly Skin and not see a whole lot of a difference. But ultimately I felt like the little bit of extra tankiness that we get from it outweighs the little bit of debuff that we get from having less action points. Then we do have Speed Demon, which on first glance could be something people wouldn't consider necessary for a melee build, just because reloading seems to be the big point here, which we don't do with melee weapons, but just the extra movement speed feels good to have on a melee character to close gaps between you and an enemy quicker, and overall traversing the land just feels way more way better just by being a little bit faster. So Speed Demon is always, like Marsupial, a good decision in my opinion. And lastly, we do have Twisted Muzzles. Lowers our gun accuracy, which is irrelevant, we don't use any guns, but gives us extra melee damage, which for obvious reasons is a good thing, and it gives us a chance to cripple an enemy. Now this part, crippling an enemy, never really felt too important to me on melee characters. It just doesn't seem to work that well, but it's nice to have. It's not it's just pure benefit. So yeah, ultimately though, 25% extra melee damage, that's the thing we're after here. Going over to our equipment, starting off with the weapon. Vampires, faster swing speed, less VATS cost. Shish kebab. Now obviously you could go with something like anti-armor or aristocrats if you have the caps for it, or you name it, something that gives you a buff to your damage, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary. Overall, increasing your survivability a tad bit by using the Vampires effect, which heals you on hits, felt like a nice choice, especially since coupled with swing speed, this thing actually hits quite often, and therefore you get a lot of benefit from the Vampires effect. So yeah, felt pretty right to use this combination here. And less VATS cost, this was pretty much the only thing I was that set on this character here. I mean, swing speed also was a good decision, but yeah, swing speed and less VATS cost. Less VATS cost, pretty obvious. We're using this weapon here entirely within VATS, so reducing the amount of action points, and therefore increasing the amount of hits we can get on an enemy staying within VATS was nice. Then the only modification that we get for this weapon is the extra flame jets, which just adds extra energy damage and overall brings our damage to a pretty comfortable 85 ballistic and 85 energy damage. Not energy, it's fire damage, it's a specific one, which is pretty cool. So yeah, like it a lot. Obviously makes a visual change a little bit, and in a cool way in my opinion. Not really practical in real life probably, but yeah, I really love the shish kebab. I mean, you can definitely have your problems with the low-wise being in Fallout 76, but yeah, I still like it. Really cool weapon. I had a lot of fun with it. Condition goes down relatively quickly here, but for once we don't have a single perk that helps us in that regard, so if that's a problem, you could probably make room for some perk points in Makeshift Warrior or Luck of the Draw, something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Then we go over to our armor, and pretty much it's just Brotherhood Recon armor, and the only thing I really was looking out for is to have a full set of action point refresh on this occasion, just because, yeah, as I said, we are bound to run out of action points every now and then in fights, and yeah, having them come back very quickly is pretty much key here. Other than that, I mean, Zealots is cool, Hunters also doesn't hurt, fighting Yaogwai or something, but we do have 2 Nocturnal pieces and a regenerating one, so overall you can see it wasn't really too important for me to actually do something here. Another big thing is I didn't bother to buy the modifications for the weapon in order to do something here. You could make it way more effective by going for, what is it? Yeah, anyways, the modification that increases your resistances, but due to the fact that we have the right perks and some mutations, you can see we are already at a very comfortable 445 damage and 405 energy resistance, so it wasn't really necessary to do a whole lot here. Could have done so, but to be completely honest, I just forgot, and that's just a reason to assume that, yeah, I didn't really need it too much. Then we do have a Shielded Secret Service Under Armor. I went for the Raiderish version, which was a skin. I think you unlocked it during last season on the scoreboard. I decided to go with this one just because it's a little bit more black, and the Raider aspects you don't really see in your under your armor. So it's just so that the overall appearance is a little bit more dark compared to the Union version of the Secret Service under armor. And Secret Service under armor in and of itself is just nice for extra strength and endurance. So extra melee damage, extra tankiness. Perception doesn't really do anything to us. You either have 95% hit chance or nothing with a melee character in VATS, so increasing your perception doesn't do anything to you. Now for once, this is pretty much the under armor I always go for with melee weapons. For once, there could be an argument to use something like radar under armor, just to get a little bit more action points. But yeah, still, the benefits from extra strength and endurance outweigh those from extra agility in my opinion. So that's why, yet again, I went with Secret Service under armor. And that's pretty much it when it comes to our equipment. So we're left with our perks, and in strength it's pretty straightforward. We do have all our gladiator perks maxed out in order to get damage for our one-handed melee weapon. We do have Incisor for extra armor penetration, and we do have Martial Artist for extra swing speed. So you could, and oftentimes when I'm doing a melee character, I go with rank 2 of the gladiator perks in order to make room for something like blocker or so. But on this occasion, I just wanted to go pretty straightforward with this combination. So yeah, not a lot to say here. Perception, I just put in something. You really don't need anything in perception. Probably the best perk would be 1 rank of glow sight or something, but it really doesn't matter at all what you're doing here. So this is definitely our dump stat. Then another big thing I wanted is to have endurance maxed out pretty much. So yeah, I just wanted to be relatively tanky. I do have Life Giver here, ghoulish, always a situational perk, but still I like it. Give you some passive healing whenever you are near a fissure site or something like that, and take radiation damage, which we simultaneously heal with What Rats as a legendary perk. So when you are in mildly irradiated areas, this just overall adds to your tankiness. So that's why I like it. Photosynthetic, this synergizes relatively well with Ghoulish in a lot of situations, because during the day you get some passive healing from this perk, which is also nice. Yet again, situational, but I do like it. Then we do have Adamantium Skeleton and Fireproof. Now Fireproof I pretty much don't have to sell to anyone. It's one of the better defensive perks, especially if you're going against Scorch Beast. And Adamantium Skeleton, always a little bit of a debate. Is it necessary? Is it not? No, it's definitely not necessary. You can definitely just heal off your injured limbs with Stimpaks. They are common, they are abundant, but I still like to have it. And ultimately, one situation I find myself in relatively often is that I want high endurance in order to get a little bit more tanky, but when it comes to endurance, you can pretty much feel free to do whatever you like in most situations, so I'm sure if you don't want to use Adamantium Skeleton, you can just use something else. Then we go over to Charisma, and we do have Strange in Numbers. This is a pretty straightforward one, gives us extra damage when we are in a team with other people that are mutated for once, because it directly buffs our mutation that gives us extra damage, Twisted Muscles. And in addition to that, it also gives us yet a little bit more strength from Herd Mentality, which also buffs our damage a little bit. Gives us a little bit more endurance. It's overall a nice perk. For only 1 perk point of investment, it's great. And the other perk is Friendly Fire. Now this is something I haven't really touched upon during the video. We are a team character, not to a point where we are completely dedicated to it, but since we are wielding a weapon that does fire damage with the Shish Kebab and this perk, you can heal friendly NPCs or teammates. So what you can do is during events like Fastnacht or during the Metal Dome event, you can heal some of your allies, and in some events this can actually be really useful, and people will be glad that you are there repairing basically your allies. So it's a cool perk. Now you could make an argument that Tenderizer would be better here, and a lot of you might be surprised that, because I always use Tenderizer, it's a great perk, but on this occasion I decided to went without it for no particular reason, and I didn't really miss it too much. As you saw during the video, we're not missing out on too much damage, it's actually doing pretty great, and therefore I went with this one just to give the character a little bit more flavor, and yeah, that's it. Going over to intelligence, this is our second dump stat. We only have one intelligence, very rare. I know a lot of people love to have their intelligence high in order to get experience, in order to finish the scoreboard quicker and everything, but I really think, especially if you're someone who plays the game a lot, I don't really need a lot of intelligence. I'm leveling up pretty consistently. I never really have a problem not getting enough experience, and therefore, yeah, having one intelligence doesn't really hurt too much. If it's only one perk point you have to spend, I went with Scrapper just because, yeah, whenever you're done with the fight, you can just pick up weapons, scrap them, and have a good access to stuff like plastic and steel. But go for whatever you like here. One rank of first aid, for example, could be great. So yeah, do whatever you like. Then we do have agility. This is also one I definitely wanted to have maxed out, just in order to have a lot of action points. Adrenaline should be no surprise to anyone here. It's just a great perk whenever you have the points for it. Other than that, we do have Action Boy, synergizes very well with our AP Refresh armor set. Now, you could leave it out and use something else, just because 5 pieces of powered gear already are pretty great in terms of action point refresh, but I still wanted to have Action Boy here. Then we do have Marathoner. Now, this is something you never really need, but I actually like to use it on melee characters, especially because you have to close the distance between you and your enemies. You want to sprint up to them and still have enough action points left in order to use some power attacks, or in our situation, some bats attacks. So yeah, reducing the amount of action points used for sprinting is great, and especially on this character, this is basically, without being the purpose of the build, pretty much the best setup in order to sprint as long as possible, meaning high endurance, which dictates the amount of action points you do have for sprinting. And no, other way around. I think it is endurance means dictates the amount of action points you use for sprinting, and agility dictates the amount of action points you have for sprinting. So having both of these stats being high, you can sprint very long, and in addition to that, having Marathoner, yeah, you can sprint even longer. Now, pretty sure there's mods for your legs that could make it reduce your action point cost for running even more, so that would be the only thing at the top of my head I could think of to further increase the amount of sprint you have. But ultimately, with this setup, you can sprint pretty much as long as you want to. Really, you won't run out of action points from sprinting. Then we do have White Knight, just to keep our armor in check, having it to repair less often and having it be cheaper to repair is a nice combination. And that left me with 1 point to spare, just unless I wanted to have my agility at 14, and I went with Born Survivor just as a safety net. Rarely use it, but yeah, whenever we get down to 20% health, we automatically use a stim pack. There's a good chance it could have saved, or it did save our ass when we were fighting the Assaultron, but I'm not really sure. And luck was pretty straightforward here, Starch Jeans and Class Freak. Now, there would have been good perks to use in luck if I had more points for it, but it felt like whenever I was going up to like 9 or 10 luck, I was also close enough, so I said that maybe it would be a good idea to go into crits still, and at that point I felt like, yeah, if I do, I might as well do correctly and go up to 15 luck. And overall, yeah, I decided to keep it really low, and I didn't really regret the decision. Keeping our mutations, not getting any new ones is nice with Starch Genes, and reducing the debuffs from our mutations by using Class Free is also great. And yeah, that means the only thing we are left with is our legendary perks, and the boring ones right out of the way. Strength, Endurance, and Agility are legendary. Strength and Endurance are maxed out at 15 to begin with, so we just get more passive bonuses from the increasing our stats in this regard. More melee damage from extra strength, more HP, therefore more tankiness from legendary endurance, and agility was at 12, so we boost that to 15 in order to get access to more perk points. Then we do have Ward Reds. Especially with a melee character, you accumulate reds or red damage pretty quickly when fighting ghouls and stuff like that. So ultimately, yeah, sure, you can just use a red away. They are pretty abundant just as stim packs, but I just like to have Ward Reds. It's one of my picks I pretty much always have, just for convenience. And yeah, Hack and slash, pretty much the center of this build and one that you would prioritize on this occasion, or taking one for the team. These are both pretty powerful. We are always playing in a team, so being attacked by an enemy, which happens relatively often, as you can imagine, with a melee character, makes it so that particular enemy does take 40% more damage. Huge benefit, often happens, so yeah, taking one for a team, really good. And hack and slash just makes it so yeah, we have a 50-50% chance to do the area of effect damage within VATS. So yeah, this was pretty much all I went for on this character, and yeah, I hope we done a little bit of a quicker video for once. Think we done well on this occasion, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.